Hello and welcome to our final session for the day. My name is Chad Toprak. I'm the director of Freeplay, and I'm very excited to introduce two wonderful guests for this session called A Bushwalk in Red Desert Render. But before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that Freeplay hosts and broadcasts from the stolen lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, where stories have been shared and games have been played since time immemorial. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and to anyone watching who has a connection to the world's oldest continuing culture. Sovereignty was never ceded, and the violence of the colonial project is ongoing. Freeplay also stands in solidarity with Black communities both here and around the world against prejudice, injustice, and violence. Black Lives Matter is not a new or revolutionary statement, but it is one that needs to be said and said again and said louder. Joining us this evening, we have two special guests, Ian MacLarty and Kalonica Quigley. Ian is a video game developer living in Melbourne with an interest in small scope experimental designs. He regularly releases small non-commercial projects, but has also self-published several award-winning commercial games. He has a background in computer science and often uses generative techniques and self-made tools. And Kalonica is a 3D artist and game developer. She's worked on numerous Melbourne-made games, including Dead Static Drive, Untitled Goose Game, and Wayward Strand. She recently collaborated with Jason Backer to create the experimental driving game Need for Billion Speed. And over to you.
Thanks, Chad, and welcome everyone. Today in Red Desert Render, I'm Kalonica, and I'm represented by this purple, athletic-looking humanoid.
One of the tracksuit.
Yeah. And this is Ian, the purple and green watermelon with a mohawk.
And that's Chad over there.
Chad here.
Yeah. And someone else. We don't know who that is.
So we're going to be walking through Red Desert Render and chatting about the game, its influences, and how it was created. So you're welcome to join us in this session in the game, but there is a limit to the number of players that can be online at once. And you can also ask us questions anytime in the YouTube chat. So let's start walking, Ian. Where do you want to go?
Where do you want to go?
There's like a nice pointy peak that way.
Yep, I think that's the one we were at the other day, but there were some nice mountains there, so we could go back there and go explore those mountains maybe.
Sure, I don't know.
Let's do that.
All right.
We're quite a little group of people. It's nice.
Nice outfit.
Yeah. I'm glad everyone's kind of dressed up for it, because by default, you just start off in a very humanoid kind of shape like you are in. But everyone's gone and dressed up, which is nice. I really like this one. It's like a big penguin.
So Ian, how do you describe Red Desert Render?
So I was actually watching some Bob Ross on Twitch the other day, and it made me think that actually the way that I really think about this game is as a landscape, in a similar way to the way a Bob Ross painting is a landscape, except that it wasn't made with paint and canvas. It was made with algorithms and maths. So this landscape is all procedurally generated, and it goes on forever. And there's a couple of sort of things I was watching the Bob Ross video that kind of made me think that. And the first was that he often says, like, you can create, you're creating your own little world. You can put a happy little tree there. You can do whatever you want. And that's kind of how I felt when I was making this. Like, I can just make this world, and it's my world to explore, and I can kind of put whatever I want in it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that he does is he's very economical with his paint. So he'll get a little bit of a little scoop of paint on a scraper, and he'll scrape it across the canvas, and it'll in one stroke he'll create all this detail just from little holes that are left in the paint that could look like little rocks. And I kind of felt a bit like that when I was making this, because a lot of it was just tweaking parameters and numbers in some algorithms. And then I would get all these sort of interesting kind of details from it, just like very sort of simple algorithms. And so, yeah, kind of, I guess those two things made me think of this as kind of like more of like a landscape in the tradition of landscape painting.
Right.
So that's kind of one thing that it is, but it's also it's very barren actually. I like it. It's very deserty. Look at these dunes. Like, look at these dunes. That's good. I really like this. I get a lot of joy from this game. Like, I find it really relaxing. Like walking around it. So our out of bounds adventures with the friends, Goldie and Andy and some other friends too, playing Red Dead Redemption 2 online and adventuring outside of the main part of the map. And there was lots of kind of endless vast landscapes like this. And that kind of, it was a sort of a response to that, I guess, like something I wanted to make because of that. And thirdly, what it is also a bit of a dumping ground for a bunch of sort of half-baked design ideas, which I'm sure we'll come across.
So I wanted to talk a little bit more about our experience in Red Dead Redemption 2 online.
Yeah.
I guess, like, yeah, so I think part of what made it so interesting for us is that Red Dead Redemption is so crafted and designed and trying to create an impression of real. And then we entered this part of the game that wasn't held together in that way.
Yeah.
I guess, like, maybe if you could talk a bit about like some of the things we saw, but also I think both of us found it kind of like a bit like, especially that first time we went out of bounds.
Yeah.
We've described it before as like a spiritual journey.
Yeah.
So if you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so I guess there's kind of, just to set like the context, we could talk a bit about the sort of the normal game, Red Dead Redemption 2, and then our kind of out of bounds stuff. So I mean, I really enjoyed that game. But I mean, I think like most, and it has really beautiful landscapes. Like, that's one thing I really enjoyed about it. But I think like most big budget games, it because as you say, it was designed to be played as a game. They tend to end up feeling like a big theme park. You know, you can't go for more than a couple of minutes without bumping into someone who wants your help, or you know, or coming across a sort of a view that's been sort of set up for you. So even as beautiful as it was, it's still in some ways, and I think it was probably one of the most sort of naturalistic theatre games that I've played, but it still has this kind of artificialness to it. You know, it feels like a theme park. So then I think a bunch of us had played it and enjoyed it, and we decided to play the online version. And that was quite fun, just, you know, playing with friends. And then we got interested in going out of bounds. I think it was actually Andy who's most sort of based the idea. Where's everyone gone? I'm losing one. I'm just wondering, right? I'm just going to go this way. So, yeah, and like it's just like I haven't really explored kind of glitches and games much. I don't really have that much sort of interest in it as such. But the world outside of the main map, it's so vast. It's like you know, I guess about 4 times bigger than the main map. It's huge.
Yeah.
And there's so much detail in it. It's incredible. And actually, it was like a feeling of kind of, we weren't really supposed to be there, so it felt quite transgressive. And it kind of provided a window into how the game was made. Oh, there's a bath over there. You can have a look at that.
Yeah. Where are you?
Oh, I'm here with Chad and someone else.
Way over here.
Yeah, it was just like we just like got like, I think we all got a bit like addicted to just going out of bounds and exploring, because it took us like quite a few weeks of like playing almost every day to sort of begin to even explore. And that's like, that was like, I think that's probably like my favorite kind of like time I've had in a video game, was like exploring out of bounds like that. It was just so exciting. And it was like so beautiful, and like, but also like kind of broken in the sense that you would sort of have these, you know, be able to sort of poke through the geometry and see things in this kind of interesting contrasts of kind of the sort of rendering artifacts versus sort of contrasted with these really naturalistic, realistically rendered environments. But also quite exciting as a game to play. I found, like, I went like on my own quite a few times, and it takes quite a lot of effort to get out of bounds. And if you die outside of bounds, and it's quite easy to, because it's not designed, the terrain is not designed for you to traverse over. Everything's like, there's jagged edges. You can sometimes fall through the geometry. You can fall off the end of the world if you get too close to it. And if you die there, you respawn all the way back in the main map. So it's like, it's kind of like a permadeath game almost, you know. So it would take you like half an hour to get out of bounds in the first place. And then, you know, it was kind of like really exciting when you're out there, because you wanted to go, you know, exploring, and it would take you like an hour to get to where you were the last time, so you could carry on your, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was really fun, really good time.
I think another, just to wrap that up a bit, another interesting part of it was like this sense that it wouldn't be there forever, right? Like eventually they would patch the game and we wouldn't be able to go on these adventures together.
Yeah. And they did eventually. And so it's gone now. We can't actually do it anymore. So yeah, it was kind of like we had to get in all the time that where we could. Yeah. So there was this, it was it's impossible to reproduce that feeling, I think, in a game. And I did sort of try to do that a bit in this game, but, you know, I think it's like, it's just impossible to kind of recreate all those circumstances that kind of created that feeling. Do you want to have a bath?
Yeah. Why are there baths in this game, Ian?
That's a well, there are baths in Red Dead Redemption, so I guess that's one reason. I don't really know why a bath. I mean, a bath, it just seems like a nice thing to do. Like, it's a pretty pleasant thing to have a bath. I like to have baths. They give off steam, so you can like see them from far away. So you can like be looking around and see some steam off in the distance. And then you can, so they kind of draw your attention in like a, you know, without sort of, with still looking kind of natural.
Yeah.
Yeah, so not really like a strong reason for it to be a bath as such, I guess. Your bath. Oh no, I think I broke the game, Kalonica.
Oh no.
No.
Yeah, I'm sort of like flying around, so I don't really.
Yeah, that's not supposed to happen, is it? I'm not sure. I guess we could just use this opportunity to like explore around the world and have a look. I mean, this is a pretty good way to have a look around the world, right?
Yeah.
We can go and have a look over these mountains here.
Oh, where have you gone? This could be tricky.
I'm over here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so while we have this vantage point, can you talk a bit about how the landscape is generated?
Yep. So if I go up, you can probably see a bit better. So it's generated on the fly, and it sort of generates the land close to where the player is with high detail, and then it gets lower detail as it goes further away. And then as you move through the landscape, it carries on generating as you move. So there's always land around you, and you can carry on walking forever. Yeah, that's kind of, without getting into too much technical detail, it's kind of how it does it.
Yeah.
And it has a kind of a cool, so it's all bespoke, like all bespoke stuff that are made, and it has a kind of a way that it blends between kind of the low detail and the high detail. So I'm just kind of going towards the edge here, into the sunset.
Yeah,
and,
like.
Yeah. Oh, everyone's
just
back there.
Where are you?
Up here.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah, when I was first playing your solo release of this, the solo version, I mistook that this edge of the world is actually the edge, but
yeah, I think a lot of people do. So
yeah,
which is fine, because so a question I had is, I wanted to like recreate this going out of bounds experience, right? But how do you go out of bounds if the world's infinite? Like, what does that mean? So the way the level of detail works is it's normally centered around the player. But when you take a bath, it gets fixed to the bath. And so the level of detail, the area is still really detailed around where the bath is, but it hasn't been following me. So, so out here, it's really low detail, and now it's not generating at all anymore. So it's pity it's so dark.
But if we were walking, then the land would have obviously built up around us.
Yeah. So a cool thing that we can do, I'll just maybe go down here and see that I'm actually going to be on some land, not in the water, is when I stop flying around, the level of the sort of center of where the detail is generated will catch up to me, and we'll see the land kind of forming around me much more quickly than we would normally, and that's quite a cool effect. So, but it's so dark though. I wonder if he's waiting for morning.
Well, I guess we could talk about something else while we wait.
Yeah. I'll just go further and further away into the night sky.
So I was going to say that, like, I feel very fortunate to have been on this journey of development with you, from like playing Red Dead Redemption Online together and then talking about your first ideas for this game and seeing it through each of its many iterations. And when you open the game up, it has a message that says "for the grannies," and seeing that is like, oh my gosh, like it definitely feels like a special gift for us. Can you talk a bit about the very first iteration of this game and what you were trying to capture?
Yeah, so I think the first version was, I shared it with you and some other friends. It was just like an MMO kind of prototype. Do you remember that? So,
yes, the classic. Yeah. I'm just gonna casually make an MMO.
Yeah, it was really simple. Like, it was just like, you would sort of transmit each player's position, and it was really, really basic. There's no like persistent world or anything like that. But yeah, it was kind of yeah, I don't really know what I was like thinking. I wasn't really seriously thinking about making it to a bigger game or anything. But I guess I was kind of inspired by the Out of Bounds adventures that we had to kind of play with making a kind of online multiplayer thing. All right, I think I'm just really high up. That's probably also why. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just fall here. Sorry, I'm just going to do the thing now. So I'm going to fall here. I felt it land in the ocean.
I don't know.
Oh, no, I'm not. Yes, it's okay. So here we are. And so now it's really like low detail. Oh, there's a shot over there. Perfect. And then it says gradually kind of fades in and the sounds go on. And the trees spawn and like it gets more detailed. So normally this would be generating on the fly, sort of around you all the time. But because we were in that strange glitched out state, it didn't do that. But we got to explore, kind of like see it from a different point of view and actually see, be in amongst that kind of low detail area. And you can do that in Red Dead Redemption too, like in the Out of Bounds area. There's these kind of low poly areas you can wander around in.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to do that. What were we talking about?
The first iteration. So I think like it was interesting to me because it was online and it was a big generated landscape with not much on it. But it was just had this beautiful, simple joy of just walking around with your friends. And there's just something really beautiful about seeing their avatar way off in the distance. And then over voice chat, they're like, wow, come look at this. It's like this really cool mountain or whatever. That alone is there's just something about it. So nice.
Yeah. And I think that's like also kind of what we experienced in Out of Bounds, like Red Dead Redemption. Like, because it's not, there's no quests or anything out there, right? It's just stuff to look at. So, but yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff to look at.
Whereabouts are you?
I'm just by the shop here. There's a whole bunch of the people here. Wow, there's 9 people online. That's cool.
Just teleport to you.
Maybe we should get new outfits.
Sure, let's do that.
So this is, there's a whole lot of people in here. This is a busy shop. So I guess we could talk about, so this is how you change your outfits.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the other iterations in a sec, I guess.
Yeah. So obviously another thing that's in Red Dead Redemption is you can you're role-playing as a mean old cowboy, and there's shops in a traditional sense where you can buy new clothes, maybe a new cowboy hat, whereas the characters in this game are so abstract. What led you to represent the players in this way?
A few things. So one is that, like, I didn't really want to, I wanted you to be able to customize your outfit, but I didn't want to I didn't. I look like an astronaut. I didn't want to have to, design a whole bunch of clothes.
Yeah.
So this is like a sort of cheap way to do it, just by permuting some parameters of a shader, basically.
Right.
So basically changing the way that the character is rendered with some randomness. So that's, I guess, just the economy. And I'm like, I don't know, I think there's kind of a lot of room for kind of player expression in this mode. It's like, there's a lot of detail and like variation that you can get out of this. That's just a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that I read it like not in a literal way, like I'm not this person necessarily, but it's like my essence. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like I don't think we're like these weird alien ghosts traveling across the landscape. It's like, of course that's Ian, like you can tell.
Which one are you now? Actually, I lost track.
Oh, let's guess. I reckon you are maybe this blue one.
No.
Oh.
I don't know which one you're. The penguin's just sticking with the penguin.
I'm the sort of green cactus with the fuzzy orange.
Oh, this one. I'm the red one.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got like the cool tracksuit.
Outfit
on now.
Yeah. It kind of feels like PJs or something. I like kind of relaxing, and I've got sort of like my hands are showing, and I've got a kind of a sweatband.
Yeah. You were saying the other day that you came across a player who made themselves really spiky and then just kind of sat in the game.
Yeah. So
like a sculpture.
Yeah, they actually I did that once as well. I was playing around one day and I made myself into a really big brown blob, and then I put myself on a campfire, which I see there's one down there, so we'll go explore that. And it looked like a giant steaming turd. And I just thought that's kind of cool. Like imagine someone like logs on and finds this big steaming turd. It's kind of like an interesting thing to find in this landscape. What could have left such a big turd? And so I left it there overnight. So I don't know if anyone found it or not, but I thought it was I was kind of wondering if anyone else would do that. And then I logged on once, and there was someone who was just this big spiky kind of plant, and they didn't move. And then I logged on later, and they were still there. And the next day they were still there, but in a slightly different place. And so then I made myself a cactus and left it on overnight. And then they were still there the next day, but in a different place. So we had a little cactus garden going for a couple of days. It was quite cool. It's I've kind of thought about that sort of way of communicating to other people, but just setting yourself up as a little sculpture and then leaving yourself in the game, just leaving it running.
Yeah, like an interesting performance for other players.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That person is so big.
Yeah. So the campfire, when you rest at the campfire, it's kind of hard for me to show because everyone's doing it. But you kind of, it distorts you in a different way. So you keep your same colors, but it distorts you and kind of pushes and pulls your shape. Yeah.
This is probably my favorite part of the game. It's so wild.
Yeah.
I guess because in the original release version of the game, which was single player, it was used to save the game, and that would change the time of day. And now that's automated in this version. So you're oh, what can the campfire do? Oh, you just get really big.
Yeah, it was really a last minute decision. Like I was like, I have to think of something for this campfire to do. So I'm just going to make it do that. So,
I think it's a bit magic the way that you think like that you can just be like, yep, that's it, and that's fine.
yeah, I mean, I think it's nice to have a game like this where you can kind of like you want to do things that like surprise people when they find them. So, but you can kind of just sort of not really worry about like it's not like I don't have to worry about gameplay or anything. It's just like what can I just do that's a kind of fun thing, fun surprising thing. So yeah, incredibly fun to make.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna change myself. I'm just gonna. I guess I can. So if you come to the campfire, this is the campfire. It's a bit buried under sand, but you can see the smoke coming out there, just for everyone's watching. And if you see it says push E to rest, and if you push E, you'll kind of. I guess I can do it now. So you'll distort and become. And as long as you hold down E, you'll carry on distorting, and it's hard to get back to your original shape.
Yeah, I'm trying to become small again.
Yeah, I kind of liked my outfit, and now I'm just lost. There we go. I've kind of got some big shoulder pads now, and like almost 4 arms, I think.
Nice.
Yeah. I think I made it. It's almost like I've got a wingsuit now. It's like I'm a bat in a tracksuit.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting to go back to talking about the different iterations of the game.
Yep.
So the first one was multiplayer. Then you released the second one, which was 2-player. And actually in that version of the game, you could sort of customize your character in this way at any time.
Yep.
I thought that was really interesting because I found myself thinking through these things like, oh, to climb this particular hill, I need to look like a really big flower. And now that I'm at the top, I really need to be blue. And that would just be perfect. Like, it's
the scene, yeah.
Yeah, there's not really any logic to it, but it feels right.
Well, I think it's just like you have complete control of the image that you're generating, right? Like, yeah.
Another element that was in that 2-player version of the game was this sort of asymmetrical gameplay, because I don't think I mentioned that the 2-player game is local split screen, so you're playing with one other person sitting next to you. So I guess that's sort of similar to what we experienced with the bath, where well, you could probably explain it better than I can, how that worked.
Yeah, there was so that version was made for a party. So it was made for Harbour Garden, which was a party. Was it part of? No, it was during Melbourne International Games Week. And so it was a party where they were going to show a bunch of games, and there'd be lots of people. So a local multiplayer game made sense, and being able to change your outfit on the fly was kind of made sense in that context, because you want people to do it. People are probably going to be just playing for 10 minutes at a time, so you don't want them to have to necessarily find a shop and discover things. You just want them to be able to have to experience as much as possible in 10 minutes. Everyone's gathering around this cube. So what were some of the other things? Like, I think when you're in the shop, maybe... No, there was no shop. That's right. But I think with the cube... Okay, so what happens with the cube? So when you approach this cube, and we can talk about the cube, it's kind of sitting in a tree here. But they normally float. As you approach it, you end up flying up into the air. kind of a vertical. You're stuck in a vertical line when you go up and down.
Yeah, makes sense.
With the cube, I think what happened was when one of the players interacted with the cube, the other one would actually control their height depending on which direction they looked.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of, I said all these like sort of elements where players would be controlling, interacting with each other sort of non-locally, I guess. But that was also inspired by the door glitch from Red Dead Redemption 2, which is another kind of thing we played with, where if two players approached the door and one player tried to open the door and the other lassoed them at a particular time as they were opening the door and then carried them away, the game would still think they were trying to open the door and would kind of glitch out on them, and they would violently go up and down, and you could end up going really high into the sky or really deep under the surface. And so that's what that was kind of inspired by. But the player who was carrying the other player would control where they were, where the other player was, basically.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain.
Yeah.
Maybe you could explain it better than I could.
I guess, like, in its simplest form, the horizontal position of one player influenced the vertical position of the other.
Yeah.
Like,
so it's really
bizarre.
screwed up, like interesting control scheme, like it's totally unintuitive. But you could control it, And the other player, the player who was not glitched out, who was carrying the other player who was glitched out, couldn't see where the other player was. It was just as if that player was on their back, right? So we'd have to communicate like over Discord or whatever, like, hey, can you go this way? I want to see this view or whatever, I want to get this screenshot. So that was kind of inspired by that. And there's no like interaction between us, but we're still kind of getting a similar effect where you can go underground and kind of get a view from underneath the game world.
Yeah. And the imagery of the cube, of course, is like a direct reference to our adventures in Red Dead Online as well.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the cube briefly? Just like.
Yeah, I guess I find it a tricky thing to explain sort of how much of an effect it had on us, like experiencing it. But it was kind of like we'd been out of bounds, and you're still sort of like role playing as a cowboy, riding with your gang in this semi-realistic, still, even though quite glitchy out there, landscape. And then to come across this perfect grey cube just floating across the landscape, it was just a really strange experience, very like 2001 Space Odyssey Monolith kind of thing. And not in just like the aesthetic of this clean shape, but that it sort of suggests some kind of origin. Like it has this huge mystery of like, why is this cube here?
Why is there a perfect cube in this game, like outside of the main map?
Everything that everything else is built from. It's like the building block. And just so I love so much that even in the first iteration of this game, of course there was the cube, like the landscape, the cube.
It was kind of like we were just in awe of the cube, and it was definitely like a 2001 kind of Space Odyssey kind of moment, I think.
And we'll never I love that we'll never know why there's a cube.
We tried to like throw stuff at it to see if it had colliders on it, and shooting it, and like you couldn't access the cube, it was too high to get to. So I wanted something to happen with the cube here, so I kind of made it a bit close to the ground so that you would think that you could maybe get to it and then walk towards it.
Right.
Are you down here in the water?
No.
Yeah, I'm down at the bottom in the underground ocean.
Oh, okay.
Which is another thing. So we're all swimming around under the map. So we discovered that there's this vast ocean like underneath pretty much the whole map of Red Dead Redemption 2. So this is kind of like that as well.
It's sort of like so wonderful to me personally seeing like those things we discovered represented again here. Like it's just like this perfect, joyful sort of in joke even.
Yeah.
But I'm like so curious what a new player thinks about all this stuff. Someone who's never experienced out of bounds in Red Dead and doesn't have an understanding of this strange kind of lore.
Yeah.
What do you think about those people who are playing for the first time?
Well, I think, as you know, I've kind of relayed some messages that I've gotten, stuff like people, especially with the bath.
Yeah.
And they go, I think I broke your game. It was really fun, and I was flying around, but I thought I should like just let you know that there's a bug when you go have a bath. You end up flying around the map. And so it's really cool to me that like people have experienced it. I mean, not everyone, but like it's definitely a bunch of people experienced it. They weren't quite sure if that was a bug or not. And so perhaps got a bit of that kind of sense of transgression that we got. I mean, I don't really expect people to know like why the cube is a cube, but that's okay. Like,
I think it's interesting that people like come to you with like, oh, sorry, but I think it's broken. But for you, it's like, yes,
yes.
Perfect.
Yeah. So that was I mean, I think like, and I've watched a few streamers play it, and they do once they kind of find. There's always a bit of kind of surprise when things don't behave in the way that they expect them. So I think that in that sense is successful. And that was part of the reason there's a to-do list in the game. So if you push escape, you can see like a bunch of things you can do, such as try a new outfit, take a hot bath, kind of like Goose Game. But the kind of the point of that was more to just prompt people to go exploring so that they would find these unexpected things. Because I guess I was a bit worried people would think, oh, it's just a kind of landscape and that's it, you know.
Yeah. And like I read a couple of reviews of this game, and there's definitely players who are like, oh, I wasn't really sure what to do. So I think that to-do list really helps like draw them in.
I'm approaching this shop here. So this is like kind of interesting. This is what a shop looks like from underneath. And so the shop kind of pokes out the surface there. And then there's the actual interior of the shop is this room underneath the shop, because the interior is actually bigger than the shop itself. So you get teleported down to the bottom there when you enter the shop. It teleports you down there. Sometimes you can actually be underwater when you're inside a shop.
It looks like if we were to go into the shop, we'd be underwater.
Yeah. So I just thought, I haven't actually been able to find the shop like this before, so it's kind of cool, even though this is a bit of a swim. Hopefully people aren't getting too bored. But what we can do, we can go, if you dive down, it'll wrap you around and like put you all the way at the top again, and then we can do a nice fall.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of fun as well. But we can just have a look at this shop. So it's rendered with the back faces. So this is what the inside of the shop is. So if we entered the shop from the above, we'd be in this puddle of water.
Right.
All right, so if we go down, if we swim down a bit, It'll come out the top.
Oh, cool.
And then you're way up, I think about 10 kilometers up. And then you fall. And if you keep yourself rolled up in a roll position, you'll bounce really far. And you can kind of get a sense of how big it is. Well, I mean, it's infinite, but like how big this sort of rendered part is.
I didn't bounce.
Yeah, and when you're sort of bouncing so fast, the generation has a tough time keeping up, so it tends to fade in like that. I think I've lost everyone. One over here. So I haven't really explained all the controls. So you can use binoculars. You can roll. There's also a first person view, and you can roll in first person as well. And you can push X, and it makes you into a really big, tall kind of thing. And that's just really so you can show other people where you are.
Yeah. I really love that sort of like, there's no traditional chat functions in this game, but giving the player the ability to be very tall just naturally is like, works with call and response of like, where are you? I'm over here.
Yeah. I didn't really want to implement a chat thing, obviously, but like, it's just a really easy way to do that. And then you can also, there's a kind of a way to point as well. So you can push Q, and there's a big arrow will come out of your head. So you can point to other people. There you go. Yeah, it's easier to see it from the side. And so let's go over there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and so also like the thing that like I like about this game is that you can't just like hold down W and just walk everywhere. Like if slopes are too steep, then you'll slide down them like that. So you've got to kind of navigate a bit and kind of pick your way through, and you can get trapped in the geometry, or trapped in a valley that you can't get out of if you're not careful. So there's a bit of a kind of, it kind of makes, I guess that's from like the Out of Bounds Red Dead. There was a lot of that like slipping down slopes and not being able to, how are we going to get up this big mountain?
Yeah, a lot of experience slipping down slopes in that game.
Especially Out of Bounds. It just makes the landscape feel a bit more kind of like a part of like a character, and maybe has a bit more presence, like provides a bit of resistance. And it's very easy to get lost. Like say there's a bathtub over there. Okay, I'm going to go to that bathtub, and then you start going to the bathtub, and then you end up down in this valley over here, and you completely you lose your way, and you forget where the bathtub was. And I really like that sort of getting lost.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think it plays with a lot of what I assume are natural instincts of being like, there's that mountain there that points up a little bit taller than the others, so you naturally like use that to orient yourself. Whereas I feel like so many other video games in general are about like forming the land in a way that pushes you without you knowing.
Or just giving you like a little mini map, right?
Yeah, that too.
Or like waypoints or something. So you just you kind of just ignore the land.
Yeah, you don't sort of interpret it in the same way.
No,
Or even like I think it's interesting as well. I guess how it's so like in my own mind, like what I use to as a reference for where I am or how far I've traveled. But I still remember when in one of the earlier iterations, there was this beautiful huge plateau with then like a 90-degree cliff down into the water.
Yeah.
It's like so beautiful, and that's like a place that I've visited now and probably will never see again.
I really like this, that sort of, like, and that was like definitely like a thing I was trying to go for with the generation, is to have sort of distinct looking features, so it didn't look all uniform, so it kind of each sort of, you could sort of recognize places. And I tried to play with that a bit in some of the game design. So one of the quest items is grow a pumpkin, and you find a pumpkin seed, and you can plant the pumpkin seed, and then you have to go get some water to water the pumpkin seed. But the water, it has this conceit of you can only plant the pumpkin seed where the ground is fertile enough. And coincidentally, the ground will only be fertile enough when it's far enough from water, which is a bit counterintuitive. But I wanted
to know that.
So I wanted people to have to plant the pumpkin seed far away from water, and then you have to get some water. So you have to travel a distance and remember where you planted the pumpkin seed. Like there's a little sign that gets put where you planted it, but it's quite small. So you have to kind of try and, look at landmarks and kind of remember where you were and make it back and then water the pumpkins.
Yeah.
I don't know how successful that was. I haven't necessarily seen anyone do that.
Well, I think it's interesting that you could quite easily play this game for quite a long time and never see a pumpkin seed, right?
Yeah.
Which is super interesting because it's the only part of the game that has that mechanic of you are carrying a pumpkin seed that you can like use.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting that many players may never even see that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I wanted to ask you a bit about, talk a bit about your previous work. So landscapes are a recurring theme in your work, and you have explored them in many different ways. So there's like your game, A Road That May Lead Nowhere, in which you drive down an endless road through generative 3D landscapes, or Vertex Meadow, where you can input 2D images to create 3D landscapes.
Yep.
Or Catacombs of Solaris, where you navigate a kaleidoscope of colors in a totally indescribable way. And even your recent release with Gemma Mahadio, If We Were Allowed to Visit, where the environment is literally written in poem, and only by moving does the form of the world reveal itself.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know, like, what is it about landscapes that interests you?
It's hard to answer that. I guess like a lot of artists are interested in landscapes, a lot of it's a very common thing for, I guess, particularly fine artists to depict. So I guess there's certain kind of types of landscapes that are just emotionally resonant with me, or like kind of just make me feel something. And I guess that's just part of, landscapes that kind of like are from where you grew up. So I grew up in South Africa, and I think these landscapes are possibly more South African than Australian, even though a lot of the vegetation is kind of Australian inspired, just in how kind of mountainous they are. But I mean, they're not really like supposed to be from that. They're just sort of landscapes that kind of felt good to me, so I mean, I guess you could say things like they're these kind of eternal, I mean, they're not eternal, but they're a lot sort of longer living and kind of bigger than we are, and they're very hard for us as human beings to change, although we can change them, of course, but they kind of, it's very hard to just get rid of a mountain, for example. They kind of have a permanence to them. don't know, there's something melancholic about them as well. I'm not sure. But I don't know. I can't really articulate what is appealing about landscapes. They're just something kind of something primal about them. I've gone off flying again. I think I've lost everyone.
Okay. I think it's interesting that, you know, we've seen some features of the game today, like the bath and the campfire, and the shop. And all of these are about manipulating the player themselves and the way they're able to traverse the world, and it's never about manipulating the landscape.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously, as mentioned before, in video games in general, the land is there to kind of serve the player with like obvious things like taking resources from the land, but also the land is crafted in a specific way to influence the behavior.
Yeah. Or you can craft it how you want, like Minecraft.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts behind the player's relationship to land in this game?
I think that comes back to me kind of like, and I think a good way to articulate that is I see this as a video game equivalent of a landscape painting in that way. So it's like something to observe and like find beauty in, but like it doesn't serve you in any other way, you know. And the way you observe it is you walk through it, which is kind of an interesting way to experience it. I think that's how I kind of see the function of the landscape in this game as a landscape, as a kind of like an aesthetic object, I suppose.
Yep.
So like it's not about like navigating it to find a particular objective or anything. It's just about experiencing the landscape itself.
Yeah. I think it's like something that's really nice about your games in general is it's almost like nothing feels particularly precious. It's like you crest a mountain, you look at the beautiful view, and then you move on to find the next view. It's sort of like this endless journey.
I had talking about the campfires again. I don't know. Can I talk about that? It's how are we doing for time? Do I have to stop? I'm kind of having a lot of fun.
So we're almost done.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe now's a good time to show off our flying around.
Oh yeah. So there's a debug kind of shortcut thing. Where are you, by the way?
I don't know. I've lost you.
I'm here. The big red.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So this is like the bath, except this is a kind of a debug mode, and you can fly, and the level of detail will kind of keep up with you.
Yeah.
So if you're in the game, you can push Alt Control K, and that will trigger it. And so you can kind of just fly around. It's kind of it's kind of fun to fly around, but it's also a very different way to experience the landscape. I much prefer walking, like being close to the ground, just because you kind of get all these nice framings that you don't really get up here. Like you walk through a valley and you come around a corner and you get a nice framing of a nice view. Whereas up here, you just sort of see everything.
Yeah, but I definitely do this and kind of like fly around a bit like this, and then it's like, oh, that's a cool mountain. I'll go down there.
Yeah.
So I think we should probably wrap up, and I want to finish with the inevitable question: are you planning to work on this game anymore in the future?
Not this game in particular, but I definitely want to experiment with more landscape stuff and more, like I have some ideas for different techniques for generating landscapes, and I don't think I'll work on this particular game, but definitely things that are sort of along the same, explore kind of similar ideas, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's my answer.
Cool. I guess that's everything.
Yeah, I want to say thank you for everyone who joined us in the game.
Yeah,
it was really,
so
really
nice.
fun. Like, yeah, I've never had so many people play it online. So where is everyone? I think I've just lost them all again. It's hard to keep track of someone when you're flying around, I think, because you just end up being a tiny dot. I guess I could just teleport to other people. There we go. So you can push T to teleport to a random player at any point in time.
Cool. Well, thank you, Ian, for taking us
Kalonica.
on this journey. And thanks to everyone that tuned in.
No.